Hello and welcome to the Ego Chall Podcast. This is episode 23, the LeBron James episode, or if you're a loser, the Michael Jordan episode. My name is Preston Byers, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Justin Binkowski. And today we're going to talk about the final week of Call of Duty League group play in the 2021 season. We're officially done with group play, just tournaments from now on, just brackets. And we're also going to discuss the final major of the season, the Stage 5 major, which is happening this coming weekend in Dallas, Texas. How are you doing, Bink?
I was doing pretty good till about 30 seconds ago when you just made that terrible joke, but I'll get through it. Got some Call of Duty to talk about.
We do. I don't know if you want to talk about this Clayster thing at all tonight, but if not, we'll just get right into the matches because we have 10 group play matches from this past week, the final 10 group play matches of the season, which we started off with the subliners who were playing without Clayster. He announced last week before the matches that he would be taking at least 1 week off. I mean, it was kind of vague about when he would actually be returning to the team. So he missed this game, and they played the Paris Legion. I would like to kind of boast and say that I predicted this correctly. Although I am wearing a Legion hat, I am not in the Paris is winning champs crew, especially since they can't even qualify for champs. So New York actually won 3-2. I feel pretty good about this prediction, but what did you think about this match?
Yeah, going into this last week of online group play, we had the situation with Clay, like you were just mentioning, where he announced that he wasn't going to be playing in this upcoming week. And you and I actually went back to our different ways where I picked Paris to go 2-0 this week. You picked them to go 0-2. You were right this time. Even with New York playing with Diamond Con, without Clayster, new lineup again, however you want to word it, Paris wasn't able to get the job done. It was a close series. Came down the wire, Game 5 on standoff, but New York sealed the deal. If we look at the stats, I know the Game 1 hardpoint was actually a pretty good, crazy comeback, if I remember correctly. It was on Garrison, and I can't remember the exact score. I think it was like 250 to 150 something, or it was like 90-ish point comeback for New York, where Hydra just went absolutely off in the end. He ended up leading New York in this series with 1.19 KD. Mac had a 1.07 overall, and for Paris, Aqua had the highest at a 1.27, and Zap had a 1.19 over there. So it was an interesting series. Obviously, not exactly a lot to play for. I think maybe at this point, Paris had a chance of making top 3 with like some weird tiebreakers or something like that. But other than that, it was just, a match to see kind of what New York was capable of without Clayster. And if you want to talk about Clay now, we can, or we can wait until we have that other New York match. Up to you.
Let's just talk about it now. Let's get it out of the way. This is something that Crimsix, obviously three-time world champion, plays for the Dallas Empire, and one of Clayster's, I guess, most successful teammates, considering every time they team together, they seem to win a world championship or win some kind of title or something like that. So he came out this week, and I don't know if there was a reason for why he came out and he tweeted about this stuff, because I was not really paying attention, but I ended up editing this article. So if you want to read the article, you can go to .esports.com. We covered this. And Crimsix basically tweeted that when they benched Hook, the original plan was really not to, as a long-term solution, was not to replace Hook with Fellow, who did come into the starting lineup and has been Dallas's substitute for the entire season. Their plan was actually to acquire Clayster from the subliners and kind of reunite the another part of their Call of Duty League Championship team that they won with last year. just things didn't work out. Clayster said on Twitter that Illy was going to move to a submachine gun role and then bring in Clayster, who's been playing AR for the subliners. I guess what are your thoughts on Crimsix revealing this, and kind of just give me your thoughts on it.
I didn't know that's what you were talking about. I thought you were talking about the drama from the flank. But
I have no idea what
this
that
was
is.
kind of
So.
interesting. Oh, okay. We can talk about that after this, just briefly. With this Clay Crim announcement, however you want to put it. I wasn't exactly surprised just because they had that success last year in 5v5 together. And even before this season, or maybe it was at the start of the season, I don't remember, when there was like that time where I think it was Clay who said that like Hook offered to step down from the team so the team could remain like Crim, Clay, Shotzi, and Ellie, and Hook was gonna go play Valorant or something like that. I don't remember who said it exactly, but I think that was mentioned at the beginning of the season or before the season actually started. So it makes sense that that was like something that was being discussed behind the scenes. Obviously, it didn't work out, but it definitely would have been something interesting to see. Even when Fellow came to the lineup for Dallas, Illy didn't exactly have the most success on the submachine gun role, so it might have been interesting to see how that played out. But there's a bunch of different factors. Obviously, if like Fellow wasn't like a permanent like solution or what they were planning on, there could be other factors behind the scenes, like maybe Illy wasn't. I don't know. Not even gonna throw speculation on that. But it might have been a weird situation, and that could have also attributed to Illy's lack of success in that role from switching from second AR to a sub. So that was definitely interesting. But yeah, I feel like it's just another day of Call of Duty Twitter where we find something out that we didn't necessarily know. A lot of stuff happens behind the scenes, so it was interesting to have that transparency and for Krim to reveal that to everybody.
Yeah, it seems that if New York didn't have a good stage three group play, and kind of, I believe they got second at that major, at the stage three major. Had that not happened, who knows what actually goes on with New York and Dallas, because although I don't really understand the reasoning for New York to to make that move unless Clayster just kind of forced his way out. Like, why would you let Clayster go? Because to me, if I'm New York management, I'm dead set on keeping Clayster no matter what. Like, build a team around him instead of trying to build, like, obviously you have Hydra, but you also need kind of a big name most of the time. And Clayster's obviously a good leader, so I feel like he's a good piece to kind of build around. So if I were in New York, I wouldn't have really even been open to any kind of negotiation with Clayster leaving the team.
Yeah.
But I guess they were, but they did well in stage three, and I would have to assume, not having a good performance at stage four without ASIM, and then stage five's obviously been really rough for New York. So it would kind of make sense that Clayster has been struggling mentally because he maybe was convincing himself he was going to go back to Dallas and reunite with teammates that he just won the world championship with, and now he was 0-3 going into this weekend group play. So maybe that played into his decision to bench himself for the final week.
Yeah, so that's the other side to that is that the drama with the flank. I didn't actually listen or watch this most recent episode where this happened, but I saw from the Twitter account that the flank has. You guys can go check that out at the flank. They were talking. I think the episode was with Zuma and Nabel this time instead of Ben, and they were just talking about the situation with Clay.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, like I said, I didn't watch that episode, so I don't have the full context. But it was like being talked about that there was like a feeling in the team that Clay may have quit on the guys, and like Enable and Zuma were saying they didn't think that was how they didn't think Clay would do that. And then Asim said something in the chat that that's he commented on it in the chat, something like that. So it was just there's obviously stuff going on behind the scenes at New York, and we might not know the whole story, but the biggest thing right now is, I mean, we still don't know right now exactly what lineup is going to be playing for New York at this week's major or at champs. So that's what my eyes in particular are going to be on, beyond all the drama and everything going on with this entire situation.
I actually, now that you mentioned it, I actually do remember. I didn't watch this, but I did see the tweets that were happening because of this. Basically, so the flank tweeted, said, among current speculation regarding the Clayster NYSL situation, at Enable, quote, I think Clay might have just quit on him, just doesn't seem right at all. And then Asim put it in the Twitch chat, that's exactly what it was, Ian, but whatever, I'm going to keep pushing. But then Enable came out later and he replied to this tweet and said that he actually said the opposite. He said that he didn't think that Clayster would just quit on his team. So he doesn't think that it wasn't just like Clayster saying like screw it, you guys are on your own. He was saying the opposite of what the tweet said. So I think I don't think
I was mixed up on it.
No, I mean so was the Flank Twitter account, because they said that Enable was essentially saying Clayster quit, but I don't think there's anything like scandalous about this. Like it obviously got a lot of attention on Twitter because people thought, holy crap, Clayster quit on his team at the very end of the season. But one, that doesn't seem to be like the kind of competitor that Clayster is. And I mean, Asim, who would have better knowledge of this than pretty much anybody in the scene, he's denying that Clayster will quit on them either. So I don't think that there's really a whole lot there, at least from the outside. But it's interesting that it's still happening. We don't know. We're like 2 days away from the beginning of the Stage 5 major. Obviously, everybody's in Dallas, so it's not like Clayster would need to fly in from somewhere to play, but we still don't have an announcement from New York about what the roster is going to be like. Is Diamond Khan going to continue to fill in for Clay, or is Clay actually going to come back? I mean, we haven't really gotten any details on that, and that's really weird considering this is the most important time of the season.
And that's, I mean, Clay's last tweet, like his actual tweet, he retweeted something from Pat McAfee yesterday, but his last like legit tweet was from July 23rd, and it's just a peace out sign, and it appears to be a picture from an airplane. So it'll be interesting to see what goes on at this major. I mean, based on that, I would be surprised if he actually plays in the major. We won't know obviously until Thursday, but again, like I said, beyond whatever's going on behind the scenes, my eyes are just going to be on, what New York lineup shows up to the major, what New York lineup shows to the champs, and how they're able to perform regardless of, any obstacles, just like they faced obstacles since, before the season even started with Zuma, stepping down. So it's nothing new to those guys over there. It's just we're going to have to see if they're able to, get over these hurdles and pull something off.
Let's talk about these other matches this week. We had Optic Chicago versus the London Royal Ravens. Nothing really big here because neither of us thought that London would beat Optic, especially how good Chicago's looked this stage, and basically since the Stage 4 major. They win 3-0, and they secure the number 1 seed in their group for the major, which I believe is the first time that they've done that this season. I think that's because like there's been a few times that they've been in FaZe's group, and I mean that's it's very unlikely that you're going to be number 1 with FaZe in your own group, but and they've struggled at certain points in the group stage, but they've looked really, really good. They obviously beat FaZe in Stage 5 group play. The first time they've done that this season, and they lock up their number 1 seed, so they'll start in the winners bracket semis of the Stage 5 major. What do you think of this win?
Yeah, so just to reiterate what you said, it is the first time they came in first in their group. Stage 1 they came in second, Stage 2 they came in second. That's when there was a 3-way tie at 3-2, and that's when Standy came in, and like Minnesota beat Optic in Dallas, I believe, and there was like tiebreakers or whatever in that one. Stage 3 is when Optic finished in 4th in their group, had to fight through the losers bracket. Stage 4, they went 3-2, but they'd come in second in their group, and now the stage they came in first. Other than that, like you said, nothing really crazy to talk about. Scump played pretty well in this series. I know I had a couple clips here. He had a 3-piece in the S&D, and then he had a nice little streak at the end of the control. But aside from that, nothing too crazy that we really have to talk about. Just from a KD perspective, Dashy dropped a 1.44 overall. All 4 players on Optic were over 1.1. Whereas London, Afro played well. He played well this entire weekend and has been looking better recently, which is a good sign for London potentially for the future if they decide to build around him moving forward. That's another discussion for the offseason. But Afro dropped a 1.09 in the series against the Optic, whereas everybody else on the team went negative. So, just a pretty straightforward series, 3-0 at Optic.
On Friday, we had 2 matches, Toronto versus Florida and Dallas versus Seattle. Let's talk about this Dallas versus Seattle match first, because Seattle, who, they were in last place entering in this week in the overall CDL standings. They had no shot at qualifying for the playoffs. So they were kind of trolling. They were pulling out different guns. Octane, one of the best assault rifle players of all time, he's running a submachine gun and dropping a .5 KD. So I guess what'd you think of this? I mean, if you were a fantasy owner of Octane, then you probably weren't very happy. I played Mike. He did have Octane, and he still beat me, but that's more a testament to how bad my team was, not how good his team performed. So what'd you think of Dallas versus Seattle?
Yeah, I mean, this is aside from those, I guess you'll say, shenanigans with Octane running a sub. Not really shenanigans, just because it's something they've talked about. And I mean, like if he wants to go out and use a sub, like I mean, there's nothing really stopping him. He's a talented player. Obviously, it didn't work out for him to produce the results in this particular series. But I mean, like that's another discussion we can have at another time. Like I don't particularly see it as like quote unquote trolling if guys are using different guns. Like these are professionals. It's not like they had Octane shoots straight with an AR and doesn't shoot straight with a sub or something like that. But besides that point, I mean that just kind of made this more interesting. I guess this was really another just a series that didn't really mean much. Obviously, Seattle's out of it. For Dallas, they're just trying to get those points for that battle for second place with Toronto, which we see later on in the weekend. So Dallas just got the job done here to keep pace with Toronto, who ended up winning the match before this against Florida, which I had high expectations for. It was a pretty close series aside from that last map, but I was expecting that one to maybe be a little bit closer, but in the end, Toronto and Dallas both got wins on Friday.
Yeah, just to briefly talk about this Toronto-Florida series, because this was obviously the more interesting series of the day, because we actually had 2 playoff teams, 2 teams that have been performing well during this stage. And Florida, they nearly take the first 2 maps. Like, I mean, they really could have swept Toronto in this series based off of just the results, because we have Garrison Hardpoint 214 to 202, Toronto wins. Standoff Search, Florida wins 6-5, and Garrison Control, Toronto wins 3-2. Obviously, like you said, Raid Hardpoint, the 4th game, is pretty heavily in favor of Toronto, but those first 3 maps are really close. Florida, they could have came out with a victory. I don't think anybody really stood out like in general, because you have Skies who had 12 kills and Awakening at 10 kills in the Standoff Search, so they had good games, but overall there wasn't a statistical leader for their team that was jumping out.
Yeah, I mean, I like I said, this was a match I was looking forward to just because, like you said, 2 playoff teams. Florida was playing well coming into this, and it was close, especially that first map coming down to time. That's something we haven't seen a lot this year. Game 2 comes down to round 11. The controller comes down to round 5 overtime. And then Toronto. We've seen Toronto on hardpoint, raid hardpoint a bunch this year. It feels like, and that was just one they were able to take control of the series with. And then it's interesting too. They did win all 3 respawns in the series to get the job done over Florida. But I guess this just in my eyes, even with Florida playing well heading into this match, it kind of just, goes back to like that tiered ranking that we've just been repetitively talking about, where I guess I would have like Toronto in a tier above Florida, just based off their performance this year.
Let's talk about these Saturday matches: Paris versus London, Minnesota versus Florida, and Optic Chicago versus the Los Angeles Thieves. Let's start at the top. We had two teams that are not going to the playoffs. I think I joked about how exciting this series would be because, I mean, neither team is very good. Turned out to be a really exciting series. It's just not a lot of people were really tuning in for it. Paris ends up losing this 3-2, so they go 0-2 on the week. London avenges their loss from earlier in the week as well. And it goes down to a Game 5, Round 11. What did you think of London's win and their final win of the regular season, or the group stage, I guess?
Yeah, this was just, again, like I said earlier, I guess gave Paris too much credit trying to give them a 2-0 week in my predictions, and they let me down one more time. But they did almost make that comeback. They forced a Game 5. We're going for the reverse sweep. We had 2 round 11s in the series for like a series that really didn't mean too much. It was entertaining to say the least. Again, Afro was the star for London in this one. Dropped a 1.34 overall KD, had 102 kills in the series. The next closest was Aqua for Paris, who had 90. So he played well, and he's playing real well heading into this major. So obviously London will not be competing at champs, but they finished in 4th in their group for stage 5, so they have that little buffer in the losers bracket. And we'll look at the bracket later on in the show, but I guess it's possible that London could go on a little bit of a run if Afro is able to continue playing like this and rally the troops behind him.
In these last two matches, we had two upsets. First, we have Minnesota sweeping Florida. I mean, Minnesota beating Florida in general is kind of surprising just as by itself, but a sweep is really, really surprising to me. And then in the final match, we had Optic Chicago losing to the LA Thieves, which is so very Optic of them to get all those expectations very, very high, and then to lose a pretty much a meaningless group play match just to kind of spread a little doubt on how well they'll do at the major. Regardless, like we said earlier in the show, Optic did clinch the number 1 seed in Group A, so at least they don't have anything to worry about in that regard, but still a loss to the Thieves. Let's talk about this Florida-Minnesota match first, though. Minnesota sweeps Florida. How surprised are you about that?
I was very surprised. I pretty sure I picked Florida when we were doing the prediction show last week to take that one, and I probably would have, even if I didn't for some reason. If you asked me before that match, I feel like I would have went Florida. So just to look at the scores, the Moscow Search was 6-5, came down to around 11. But other than that, Garrison Hardpoint was 250 to 140, and the Garrison Control was 3-0 for Minnesota. So I was surprised by Minnesota getting the 3-0, and I'm surprised even just looking at the score lines for those maps. That even if you told me Florida was going to lose this match, I didn't think it probably would have went down like that. So that's, we've talked about it before with, Florida being one of these, like, I don't really have a word for it, just like, a coin flip team, I guess you could say. I think that's a term people have been using, where, sometimes they show up and other times they don't. So, if we, Minnesota, we look at the numbers here. Priest dropped a 1.63. Major Maniac had a 1.53 overall KD in the series. Skies had a 1.06 for Florida. He only went 38 and 36 though, and everybody else on Florida was negative. So, I guess this kind of just makes it interesting what we're gonna expect from Florida at this major. That they're in a position now. Gonna look at the overall standings. Yeah, we talked about it on the last show. I remember that because Minnesota had a 20-point lead over the Thieves and Florida for that 6th spot, which guarantees a winner's bracket at champ. So that was like a match right there where Florida, if they wanted to, get into the winners bracket scenario for champs. It was kind of like a must-win match for them to try and help uh, improve their case. Obviously, if they do better at the major than Minnesota um, and get more points there, then that's another way. So it wasn't technically must-win, but it was certainly a match that could have helped improve their odds at getting into the winners bracket from champs. So going to be interesting to see what Florida shows up uh, at the major. Obviously, just like we were talking about with London, Florida finished fourth in their group for stage 5, which means they have a little bit of a buffer in the losers bracket, but they still are starting the tournament immediately in the losers bracket, which obviously is going to make it harder for them as opposed to a team like Minnesota who can lose a series without being eliminated. So if you're playing catch up to Minnesota already to try and get in winners bracket for champs, they're on the back foot immediately.
Yeah, it's not a good result for Florida fans because, like you said, it's not a guarantee that they start in the losers bracket at champs, but it certainly doesn't help their cause. And for the Thieves, a win here, while it means it's not it's like the opposite of Florida. It's not a guarantee that you start in the winners bracket if you end up getting out, or this win doesn't like just completely solidify your place in the winners bracket because they're obviously going to still need to jump Minnesota as well. But this is a big win for them, and it's just interesting that the Thieves pull out this win because those first two maps, if you would have shown them to me, I've been like, yeah, it's a 3-0 easy for Optic because Moscow Hardpoint, Scump drops 22 kills, Envoy drops 21, and Optic win 250 to 27 or 250 to 72, excuse me. And then on Express Search and Destroy, Scump and Dashi combined for 18 kills, and it's a 6-1 win for Optic. That's kind of where it ends, though. Optic just can't close out the series, lose 3-1 on Checkmate, 250 to 196 on Checkmate Hardpoint, and then lose 6-3 on Moscow Search and Destroy to finish out the series. What did you think of Optic's loss here? Do you consider this more of a win for Thieves or a loss for Optic, considering Optic had a 2-0 lead here?
I think that is worth mentioning that it was, a reverse sweep. Optic had the 2-0 lead and a chance to close it out. But again, like we talked about just a few minutes ago, Optic had already secured the first seed heading into the major. They're kind of in a spot in the regular season standing. They're in fifth now at 310, and New York is only in front of them at 320. So I believe because New York, let me look real quick. New York only won one match. Yeah, New York only won one match in group play. So that means Subliners were at 310 heading into group play. And then obviously Optic won 4. So they were at 270. But before that, they were kind of in like this weird spot where it felt like they weren't really in that race for second place with like Dallas, Toronto, and New York. Whereas, and they weren't like in jeopardy of falling out of like that sixth spot with like Minnesota, LA Thieves, and Florida. They were kind of like directly in the middle for that. Now they're in a position where if they get like a second place finish or even win this major, they could potentially come in second overall in the standings and get that bye for champs in the winners bracket. So that would be huge now. But other than that, I don't know. It's tough. Like I don't think, I think it's just incorrect to say like because Optic had already locked up first, they like didn't care or try in the series. Like obviously they were trying. Like this is the HBR Classic as you coined it. Like Optic versus Nadeshot. It's a big match either way. And I just think it's a testament to the Thieves being able to come back. It's not like those first two maps were particularly close, and the Thieves were just able to flip a switch, fight back, and pull off a reverse sweep. So I'm not particularly worried for Optic heading into the major. I think, gave them some more maps to practice, maybe some more work heading into the major. We'll see how that shakes out for them. I still think, FaZe is a better team than Optic, regardless of the result previous in group play. But yeah, I just feel like this is a group play match, and it's a good win for the Thieves, whereas it's not like necessarily a red flag end of the world loss for Optic.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I would just say to anybody that uses the excuse like, "Oh, they already had number one seed," like they weren't trying. It's like, what were they doing in the first two maps then? Because they
Yeah,
completely
yeah,
destroyed
exactly.
the Thieves. So it's not like they just came
It's
out
not
and
like
lost
this
three
is
matches or three maps.
it's it's not like this is the NFL like week 16
Yeah.
where you're starting your backup quarterback and second string players or anything like that. I feel like that argument just doesn't fit this scenario or really esports in general.
Yeah, you could say that they're trying out new things and some of the things just didn't work out that the way they hoped it. But to say that they just weren't trying or like they they didn't care because in esports it's like I mean momentum is a real thing to get the confidence to keep winning, especially when you're going into a very important tournament. They can climb spots and seeds in seeding for champs in at the major. Like this is a very important tournament in terms of seeding for the teams two through five, and then the teams six through eight. They all have something to play for in that regard. So there's nothing that Optic should be overlooking and saying, well, we're just not going to try. And I don't think they were. I think it was just a matter of they slipped up. They couldn't finish out the series, and the Thieves end up winning it, which is very big for the Thieves. And it's not, like you said, it's not a huge loss for Optic. It's not going to kill them to lose this kind of match, but just an interesting result nonetheless. Do you want to talk about these last three matches? So we have some really I mean, we had one dud because we have Seattle versus LAG. I'm very much off the LAG bandwagon at this point in the season, but these are literally the two worst teams statistically in the league. I believe heading into this series, they combined for 15 wins this season. Just to put that in perspective, the of the top eight teams, the fewest wins is Minnesota with 16. So I mean, even if you put them together, they're not having a real good season so far. And but Seattle ends up winning this. I didn't end up watching this. I did see that there was some drama on Twitter about like broken GAs or whatnot. I'm not sure if that really played a factor into it, but Seattle ends up winning 3-0. Anything stick out to you in this series?
As far as I remember, I mean, I was watching the series, but I wasn't like paying a ton of attention just because, like you said, I mean, it's a battle of last place. I did think it was interesting, just as a side note, that they were LAG Twitter was kind of hyping it up as like the big one. I thought that was kind of funny. I mean, it's just a way to try to get more people to tune into a match that really, like we said, didn't have much meaning. But in regards to the GA thing, it was more, as far as I understand, it was more fans being upset that GAs weren't broken in a meaningless match and the players still played, to the current GAs. I don't really think. I mean, it makes sense to me. I guess I could see it either way. But you don't want, if players have deemed like snipers and stuff are uncompetitive, you don't want to just see them pulling it out. I don't know. Maybe from an entertainment standpoint you do, but for the sake of competitive, it might have been a little weird. Um, Regardless, not much to say from this one. Seattle came out, got the job done. It just solidifies the Gorillas' winless stage at 0-5, 0-5 since the change with Mental, and they're gonna head in to this next major in that losers bracket with a match against the Subliners, where if they lose, their season is just over.
Yeah, so the LAG, like you said, 0-5 this stage. They won 2 of their 17 maps in stage 5, which is unsurprisingly the worst of any Call of Duty team this season or in this stage. Seattle was 4-12, so had they not won this series, they probably would have had the worst record. But either way, I just thought it was interesting that just these teams in general. I mean, you got to put the schedule together somehow, but it just seemed very anticlimactic to have two last place teams facing each other on the final day of group stage. Regardless, we on paper you would think we'd have two entertaining matches ahead of us. We had Atlanta versus New York and Dallas versus Toronto. Those are four of the top five teams in the league at the moment. So you would expect, something to actually happen there. Unfortunately, Atlanta, they just steamroll New York, which isn't very surprising considering the roster changes that New York has had to deal with Clayster benching himself and taking that leave of absence. And then Dallas, they actually beat Toronto, which is pretty surprising considering, Toronto has looked really good this stage, and Dallas, I believe they lost earlier in the week, if I'm not mistaken. So, or maybe not. No, I don't think so. Never mind.
Mm-hmm.
I just have Dallas on the brain for some reason. So Dallas wins 3-1. What did you think of this match?
Yeah, so just real quick, I don't think we really have to talk about Atlanta, New York. It was just an absolute stomp, 3-0. Base took care of business. Abizi dropped a 2.0 overall KD. He went 52 and 26.
MVP push?
Simp went dropped a 1.69, going 61 and 36.
MVP push?
Whereas Mac had the highest KD on New York at a 0.74. He went 34 and 46.
MVP push?
Just puts it in perspective that it was a tough series for New York and just business as usual for FaZe. But for this Dallas Toronto match, like you said, this was a battle for first place. Whichever team won this match would have first place in Group B for Stage 5, guarantee that bye for the first round of the Stage 5 major, and would be in second place in the overall CDL point standings because heading into this match, Toronto was at 355 and Dallas was at 350. So it was a really important match, and I believe I picked Toronto to win this one, and I got another prediction wrong just because Dallas is apparently on a different level. They won both hard points in this series, which was somewhat surprising. Toronto's been a good control team for most of this year, especially since Insight joined the team. So Toronto was able to win raid control 3-2. But the maps were all close in this series. Raid hardpoint, Dallas won 250-231. Express search, Dallas 164. That raid control, like I just said, was 3-2 Toronto. And then Garrison hardpoint was 250-216 for Dallas. I think Dallas was in control. Yeah, I wrote it down. Dallas was in control of that Garrison hardpoint, and Toronto almost made a wild comeback there towards the end. But Dallas was able to close it out to win the match, guarantee first place in Group B, and get that bye for this major. So it was a big win for them, obviously. If we look at the stats, pretty surprising that all four players on Toronto, although they all had above a 0.9, all four players were negative. Kleenex had the highest KD at a 0.97. Insight had the lowest at a 0.91, so it's not like anybody like extremely underperformed. They just, all were negative by a few kills here and there. Whereas Shotzi, he surprisingly had the fewest kills on his team with only 89, but had the highest KD at a 1.17. Crim led the whole lobby with 98 kills, had a 1.14 overall. Illy had a 1.11, and then Vivid only went -2 and dropped a 0.98. So, yeah, like we said, it was an exciting series. Good win for Dallas, obviously. And, Dallas, heading into the Stage 5, they were just coming off that run on LAN where it was kind of like, they brought Vivid into the lineup and things didn't look great. They had a few hiccups here and there with online play. But then when they got to that LAN at Stage 4, they flipped it into another gear, got to the grand finals, and pushed Atlanta to a map 9 in the grand finals. So even though they lost, they still got second. So it'll be interesting to see how they perform on LAN again this week.
Speaking of, we have the Stage 5 Major. We bid you adieu, Group Play. We are done with you for the 2021 season. We are moving on to...
No more online.
No more online, just LANs ahead. We have the Stage 5 Major. If you're watching live, you can see the bracket on our screen. Obviously, if you're watching the VOD on YouTube, you also the good plug for our YouTube channel. Go to Ego Chall Podcast on YouTube. So the bracket is here, the Stage 5 Major double elimination bracket. I think the thing that pops out to me the most is just that Atlanta is not starting out in the winter semis, because I've become accustomed to them getting that bye and only having to win 2 matches to win a championship. But this time around, they're going to have to go from winners round 1, since Optic and Dallas have the byes for this time around. So let's start in the losers bracket like we usually do. We have 2 losers round 1 matches. We have New York versus LAG and Seattle versus Paris. Let's start with this New York LAG match. Who do you have?
So I feel just based on, logic standpoint, Gorillas have a winless stage. New York obviously have a different situation with Clayster and everything, but they were able to pick up a win most recently this last weekend against Paris, which is another team down in that bottom 4 with Gorillas. So I'm expecting New York to take this one. I know you probably might say this is where the Gorillas start their wild losers bracket run to the Stage 5 Major Championship. So I will go out on a limb, I guess, and pick New York.
You think you know me, but you don't. LAG lose 3-0 here. Them bums need to get out of my face. They have disappointed me way too much this season. I bought LAG merch. I'm one of the only people in the world to own such merch, and they have just disappointed me time and time again. So I'm out on LAG, and after Thursday afternoon, LAG will also be out of the Stage 5 Major. New York wins 3-0. Let's talk about Seattle, Paris. I mean, these 2 teams have also disappointed me, but in different ways, I guess. Seattle went on that huge losing streak this season where they didn't win a match for 2 months straight. They didn't win a control for 2 months straight, and then Optic was like, here you guys go, here's a match, here's a control win. And then they had a little success at the major. They got top 8, I'm pretty sure, and that was encouraging for their team. They weren't able to grab a top 8 spot in the playoffs. Same with Paris. They showed some glimpses earlier in the season, and then as soon as they put on this hat, they started to be bad again. So not sure what's happening there. Who do you have, Paris versus Seattle here?
Yeah, I mean, you're rocking the hat, so you're obviously picking Paris here, so I'm going to go with Seattle. This is just another one where I feel like, based off what we just saw from Seattle at the most recent LAN, I believe they might be able to pull something off where they win a couple losers bracket games again at this major on LAN if the team's able to perform just like they did at Stage 4 Major. So I'm going with Seattle here.
Yeah, it's a tough match for me just because Seattle, I mean, if Subtane is playing, I'm picking Paris, but if not, I mean, Seattle has looked better more recently. With this last week, they actually picked up a win, which Paris did not. They looked pretty bad in those 2 matches, and one of them was against London, who I don't think is good either. So it's kind of discouraging. I'll still go with Paris, but really I don't know about this one. I think that they have the ability. I guess what I'm trying to say is they each have the ability to lose. It's just which one will actually lose here, and I think it'll be Seattle. I think they have the better ability to lose this kind of match. So I say Paris moves on to round 2, where they will play the London Royal Ravens. So you got Seattle versus London. I have Paris versus London. Who do you have, Seattle versus London?
I'm going to go with Seattle again. This will be an interesting one. Just again, like we mentioned with London's most recent match, Afro's been playing well, so my eyes are going to be on him, regardless of who London plays, to see if he's able to perform well in this match, because I actually don't remember what London did at the Stage 4 Major on LAN. I think they might have, let me look, because they came in 5th place, and they played Seattle, so that means they lost in the first round of the Stage 4 Major. So that would be a rematch from Stage 4 Major, which kind of strengthens my pick in my head of Seattle here. So, going with Seattle.
I'll go with London. Afro's looked really good. Paul X has looked pretty good as well in some matches. So I I mean I don't know. Like some of these bottom teams are so hard to judge because I guess the reason they're at the bottom is the consistency. It's just not there. They can't do it consistently. They can't perform at a high level and continue to win consistently. Maybe London can. Maybe their win this week will kind of give them some encouragement and push them forward. So I'll go with London here. And then we both have New York moving on to round two to play Florida. So Mutineers versus Subliners. Who do you have?
I'm going with Florida here. Again, we don't know technically what lineup we're going to see from New York. But just with everything going on in that camp, I feel like this is a match that Florida almost has to win. It is interesting, now that I'm thinking about it, that New York played Florida at the Stage 4 major with Decimate in the losers bracket, and New York took that match over Florida. But I'm still going to go with Florida here just because if Florida wants to have a shot at improving their seed for champs, they can't lose this match. They just can't.
They can't, but they might just because Florida's been like
Yeah,
that
they
the
might.
entire season. I agree with you though. I think Florida wins this, but I think it's because even if Clayster plays, New York has been used to starting in the winners bracket, and while they haven't had consistent success in the winners bracket, they typically they kind of find even if it's in a loss, they figure something out. They improve mentally, or they seem to figure whatever went wrong in their loss. They seem to kind of fix that in the losers bracket at least initially. And I kind of saw that in the stage 4 major where they're in the winners bracket with Decimate, but obviously they don't have a ton of practice with him. They end up losing their winners bracket match. They drop down and they beat Florida. I kind of think that is their way for success, and they just don't have that. They don't have the buffer because if they screw up really badly, they're going to get beat by LAG, and that's one of the saddest things I've ever heard. So if that happens, I mean they're out of the tournament, and they go home with 0 CDL points. And if they get to Florida, I still don't think that they've really learned from like the first match as much as they would in a loss. So I'll go with Florida moving on to round 3. Let's jump up to the winners bracket now. We have Toronto versus LAT and Atlanta versus Minnesota. Starting at the top, Ultra versus Thieves. Ultra were basically, if they had beaten Dallas in that last match of the week, they would have ended up getting the number 1 spot and they would have had a bye, but they didn't. So now they get the LA Thieves. Who do you have in this match?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. Again, just like you said, Toronto is coming off that loss to Dallas, whereas Thieves are coming off that, exhilarating reverse sweep over Optic. So, both teams technically on different trajectories just from a one match basis, I guess you could say. But other than that, I just think Toronto's the better team, so I'm going to pick them to win this one. It would be cool to see another Optic versus Thieves match, especially because it's on land. We got fans in the building for this one, so that would be an exciting match. But I'm going to go with Toronto here.
I agree with you. I think Toronto is the better team out of these two, even with the different trajectories or the coming off of a loss. It's just it doesn't seem like LAT are kind of on the same level that Toronto is. Maybe if they had more time in this season and got used to their roster a little bit more and had more practice, they could get to that level, but that's just not the case. There's only so much time left in the year, and there's no few weeks off like there is for champs now. So I think Toronto comes in and beats Los Angeles in the first round. And let's go to the second match. We had Atlanta versus Minnesota. I mean, I'm just going to say I have Atlanta. I'm not going to beat around the bush. I just think Minnesota surprised me in this stage because they were able to pull off that Florida win and sweep them. Again, Florida's not Atlanta, though, and Atlanta's the best team in the world, in my opinion. So I'll go with Atlanta here.
Yeah, I'm going Atlanta 3-0. I like you said, I was surprised by Minnesota getting that win over Florida. maybe Minnesota is able to, pull something off in the Vito Steel map in this series, but I think at the end of the day, Atlanta takes this one.
So in round 2 of winners bracket, we both have Optic versus Toronto. Two good teams. This is a very important match in terms of seeding. If Optic can win, they can keep moving up the ladder and maybe possibly grab that third or second seed in the Call of Duty League. Toronto is obviously going to try to do the same as well. Who do you have, Ultra versus Optic?
This is an interesting one. Again, I'm saying that a lot, but like we just mentioned with the possibility of an Optic Thieves match, this is obviously going to be an Optic match on LAN with fans for the first time in over a year. So the green wall could play a big factor in this series. I'm going to pick Toronto 3-2 in this one. I think it's a really close, hard-fought series. I still think Toronto is just a better team than Optic right now. Obviously, Optic came in first in their group, but both teams did go 4-1 in group play. So I think it's going to be, like I said, a really close match, and I'm excited to see how it plays out if Toronto gets here. But if they do, I'm going to pick Toronto to win this one.
I'm actually going to go with Optic on this one. I think the fans are a huge factor in this match because it's not like I think Toronto will get rattled. I don't think it's more so that. It's more just it's been 17 months or however long it has been since we've had fans at a Call of Duty event, and I think just the fact that it's been so long, none of these players have really had to deal with anything kind of even sort of like that in nearly 2 years or a year and a half. I think that is going to play a major factor, just kind of the difference. And especially, though at least Toronto will have that LAT matchup to kind of get a warm-up, but LAT's fan base is not the same as Optic's fan base. It's going to be entirely different. How loud I would imagine it to be for an Optic match, the first Optic match, and this is an important one because they're facing a team that they're really competing with in terms of seeding. Man, this is definitely, if you're not going to be able to catch all of these matches this weekend, I think most of these Optic matches are something to look out for because you will get the fans. It almost like a New York Knicks, like the first New York Knicks playoff game. It's wild. They may lose. They ultimately may lose, but the fans are going to make it a must-see experience. So I think Optic wins this based on they have played really well. So I'm not going to just say that the fans are doing it all, but I do think the fans will have a major factor in this Optic win. And then
and just real quick too, didn't want to cut you off. Sorry. Did you have something you want to say about that?
No, you're good.
No, I was just going to say, I put it at the end of our notes, but Breaking Point put out a tweet earlier today with Optic stats for Stage 5, and all 4 players on Optic had over a 1 KD in every single game mode in this stage. And in particular, Scump has been playing pretty well. So just imagine if Map 1, whether this is Optic versus Toronto or Optic versus Thieves, if Scump just goes off in Map 1 of this series and he's up there screaming, banging on his chest, the green wall's going nuts in the stands, like that could be a dagger for whichever team Optic is playing against. It could be a complete momentum killer, or just giving Optic all the momentum, I guess is a better way to say it. And that's where that's where I'm saying it. I think it's gonna be a tough match, and you're going with Optic here, so I like being different anyways and going with Toronto. But either way, like you said, I think this is gonna be a must-watch one.
Then we have Dallas versus Atlanta. This should be a really interesting matchup in terms of fan reaction too, because Dallas is of course the team, like the hometown team, I guess. Even though everybody essentially lives in Dallas, they do have their base in Dallas, and they're the team representing the city in the CDL, and they're just a really popular team. Crimsix, 3-time world champion. They have a lot of young, search and destroy, savvy players. And then there's Atlanta. FaZe is, like Optic, really popular among fans, so they should be getting a loud reaction. And these are two of maybe the top three teams in the entire league at the moment, maybe the two best teams, depending on how you guys see it. So it could be a CDL Champs Grand Finals preview. Who knows how that'll shake out, but should be interesting. I'll go with FaZe. I'm not going to pick against FaZe. It just seems like not in my best interest to do that. So I'll go with Atlanta moving on to the winners finals. How about you?
Yep, I'm going with FaZe here. Not picking against them till I really have a reason to. I know, obviously, they lost to Optic in that group play match earlier this stage, but still, we look at the overall standings. FaZe has lost 5 series all year. They are the best team in the world, like you've said multiple times already in this episode. I'm going with FaZe here.
Let's just finish out the winners bracket real quick. So the winners finals, we both have FaZe moving on, and then you have Toronto playing FaZe. I have Optic playing FaZe. So Ultra versus the Atlanta FaZe. Who do you have moving on to the grand finals?
Shouldn't be a surprise. I'm going FaZe. We've seen this match a couple times, obviously throughout the year, so I think it'll be an interesting one if it happens. But at the end of the day, FaZe that best team, and I'm going with them to get back to another grand finals.
If Simp or Abizi or any of the FaZe guys are watching, I would really, really appreciate if we see some bodies getting shot in this series, because for me, it's FaZe and Optic, which will have the most viewers, maybe other than the grand finals, depending on who makes it there. So this should be the most viewed series. The first Atlanta versus Optic series on LAN, maybe. I mean, like, this is real Optic. So this is the first time in CDL history that real Optic and FaZe have met each other on LAN. So the fans should be turned, and I would say that FaZe obviously has the advantage because they're really just really, 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 really good. And I think they're better than Optic. I'll still say FaZe, but man, Optic could really make it interesting just with kind of the fan support. And maybe we'll see like a split audience where half of it's FaZe, half of it's Optic, and fans are just going wild. But this is another one, like, if you're not going to catch every single match this weekend, go out of your way. If FaZe and Optic are playing each other, make sure to tune in because it's going to be wild no matter what happens. But I would like to see some bodies get shot just for the entertainment value of the stream. So I'll go with FaZe winning. I'll say like 3-1, but if we get a round 11 game 5, I'm all for that. Let's move on to the losers bracket. So we stay the same. So this will be, you have Optic dropping down, so they would play Florida, if I'm thinking about it correctly. And then it would be Empire versus Seattle. So let's start with Optic versus Florida. Who do you have?
Oh, wait a second.
I thought they switched in round 4.
They do, but you're missing the round 1.
Oh, okay, my bad. So LAT versus Florida, then, yeah.
Yeah, so it's LATs versus Florida and Rocker versus Surge.
Yeah, my bad. So yeah, so we have Thieves versus Mutineers and the Royal Raven, or not Royal Ravens, the Surge and the Rocker. So let's start at the top. LAT versus the Florida Mutineers.
Yeah, I'm going with Thieves in this one. Again, could see it going either way. Depends on what version of Florida shows up. Don't want to sound like a broken record. I think this is another good series, but I'll just take the Thieves to win this one.
I also go with Florida. I don't really think the Thieves are anything special, but like you said, it really just depends. If Florida plays like how they can play, and I've been saying this for literally 4 or 5 months, like if they just tuned into the podcast, they would figure it out. Just play how you're supposed to play, okay, guys? Like, it's pretty easy, right? But kidding aside, Florida, I think, should win this. I don't think that the Thieves are a better team. I think Florida is actually the better team in this series. And if Havoc goes off, Greasy Gang, we're on to losers semis, or no, losers quarters. So I think Florida moves on and they win this series. And then you have Seattle versus the Minnesota Rocker. Who do you have in that series?
Minnesota. Similar to the last land event, I've got Seattle winning 2 matches in the loser bracket and then losing in round 3. So I think that's where Seattle's season will end. Just Rocker's the better team. So even if they fall to phase as expected, I think they would be able to handle whatever team they face in this elimination round 3 match. And I'll go the Rocker.
I think I have London moving on into this round, so it'd be London versus Minnesota for me. If I'm mistaken, I mean I'm faded. I really don't know. I believe it's either Paris or London, and I'm almost positive it's London. So if it's London, Minnesota, I really just don't see London winning it. Although I mean an upset could happen because I believe London beat Minnesota in either the stage 3 or stage 4 major to upset them. I think that might have been before Minnesota brought back Major Maniac, and that could have been like the impetus for uh, accuracy to get benched. So, I mean, I might be remembering it incorrectly, but I think that happened. And I don't think Minnesota, I see Minnesota very much in the same vein as I see LAT. They are able to win against good teams, but they're also able to lose against bad teams, and that's that's not really good. It's not a good strategy for success. So I'll go with Minnesota, but man, there could be an upset there, and I could see the Royal Ravens moving on. And so we switch in round 4. So this would be the losers quarterfinals. So you have Optic losing in winners round 2, so they would drop down to the bottom half of the losers bracket. Yep. So you have the Minnesota Rocker moving on, correctly?
Yeah, so I have Dallas versus the Thieves and Optic versus Rocker.
All right, what do you got in those 2 matches?
I'm going Dallas over Thieves and Optic over Rocker.
Okay. I have Optic versus Minnesota, and I'll go with Optic. And then I would also have Dallas versus Florida. And, I mean, that's tough because I could see Florida winning it, just like I could see Florida beating literally anybody other than FaZe. But I'll go with Dallas because they've been playing really, really well as of late. So I'll say Dallas moves on. So.
Wait. You had Optic playing in the winners bracket, so you had Toronto versus Minnesota.
Okay, yeah, Toronto. So I would still have Toronto moving on to beat Florida or to beat Minnesota. Jesus, I should have just wrote this down. It would have been a whole lot easier for me. So so moving on, we have the losers finals. Who do you have in your losers semifinals?
I have Dallas playing Optic, and I'm taking Dallas 3-2. Over Optic. That's going to be, if that happens, that'll be an exciting one, similar to what you said with Optic and FaZe, especially with the fans involved. But just based off of what we saw most recently from Dallas at the last LAN, I'm going to ride with them, I guess, and go Dallas 3-2 here.
I believe I have Toronto versus Dallas. Correct me if I'm wrong.
You would.
So yep. I'll go with Dallas. I mean, we just saw this match to end the group Stage 5 group play, and I can't see a different result now. I before the match I think I picked Toronto to beat Dallas, but Dallas has been really, really good, and if they're to this point, I mean both of them have lost, so there's really no advantage in terms of that. So I'll go with Dallas beating Toronto and moving on to the losers finals. So your losers finals would be Toronto versus Toronto versus Dallas.
It would be the reverse of what you had. I would have Toronto versus Dallas here, which is what you just had, and you would have Dallas versus Optic, which is what I just had. But similar to you, like you just said, your logic lines up with what I was thinking here. I've got Dallas beating Toronto here 3-2, just because, again, we just saw this matchup. So I have Dallas making their way to another grand finals through the loser bracket.
Optic versus Dallas. I really want to say Dallas, but I'm going to go with Optic. I mean, I think they're so even right now because they've played like neither has been inconsistent as of late. They've kind of, I mean, aside from Optic losing to LAT, which I don't put as much. I don't put it. I don't think it's as important as like some people would might think, and it's obviously not meaningless because I made that argument that it's not like they weren't trying. They legitimately did lose a match, but if they're to this point, and there's no like, if it's not like a really bad situation where Dallas or Optic has like this advantage where they get to play 2 or 3 matches before you play the other team, I would say that Optic is just gonna win this match. But I think it could really go either way. I hope this one goes 3-2, Game 5, Round 11, because we saw that happen, I believe, in the Stage 1 major, or maybe Stage 2 major, where I believe it was Hook made the clutch, so it would have had to have been the Stage 1 major. So I hope something like that happens where we can have these two Goliaths face off against each other in a really important match. But I think that Optic will win this series, a very close series. And then grand finals, I have FaZe versus Optic. You have Dallas versus FaZe. So who do you got winning this match? Dallas versus FaZe in the Stage 5 major grand finals.
I got a rematch here in the grand finals from the last major on land, so I'm going with the same scoreline. FaZe 5-4, maximum drama. Should be another banger of a series. But at the end of the day, as we've said multiple times already, FaZe is the best team in the world, so I'm expecting them to win once again.
Yeah, I'll say FaZe wins as well, but Optic, they have this, like we've talked about it before. They're gonna get basically warm up matches in because Atlanta's not going to play before this match on Sunday, and Optic will, and I think that's a disadvantage for FaZe. That's something that hasn't been addressed at all this season, which is kind of unfortunate. But I still think FaZe, they might be a little slow out of the gate, but I think they pull it off like 5-3 or 5-4, and what would this be, their fourth major win of the season? Yeah, that's pretty dominant. Even if they don't win, this would be huge for Optic. I don't know what like with all of the things that would happen in the tournament. I'm not sure where they would end up being seated. Either 100% going to jump New York in that scenario, or New York loses in round 1 or 2 or even round 3, and they might be able to jump a team like Toronto or something, depending on how the placings go. So. Should be really interesting. A very, very important event in terms of seeding. So, like I said earlier, 1 through 5, well, not 1, 2 through 5, there is a possibility that any of those teams could move into second place if they have a really good tournament and the teams above them don't. And then in the seeds 6 through 8, there's really anybody's ball game there because there are only 20 points between them, and that's really just 3 wins. And if say like Florida has a really bad event, they're going to be 8th, and if LAT have a really bad event, they're probably going to be 8th. So it's very important that everybody comes out with their A game at the Stage 5 major.
Yep.
What else do we have on this show? Do you want to go through these MVP rankings real quick?
We can just mention it if you want. I'd put them there basically if we were running low on time and need something else to talk about for filler. It's not really anything different than what we mentioned on the last episode, but I thought it was cool to kind of mention it and show that guys like Nameless and Study are having similar thoughts to what we have for this MVP race.
Yeah, so basically, Nameless and Study. Nameless says this is his top 5 for the MVP. Using the MVP finalists, he has Simp at 1, Abizi at 2, Cammy at 3, Selim at 4, and Shotzi at 5. Study has Simp and Abizi at 1 and 2 still, but he switched Cammy and Selim, so Selim is now number 3, Cammy is 4, and Shotzi is still at 5. I mean, if I had to pick one of these, which is more correct, I would probably say Nameless's, because I think Cammy is, I mean, if you're just going to base it off of like, who deserves it more in my mind, I would say that Cammy is more deserving of the MVP award than Celium, but neither of them are deserving at all because Simp and Abizi simply exist in the world and they should get the award before either of them. So, what do you think of Nameless and Steady's rankings?
No, I think it was, you know, basically right along with what we've been talking about once we've talked about the subject. Obviously, I've been saying Abizi is my MVP. I still think Simp wins it at the end of the day, but just for me to, it would be lame if we both just say Simp's going to win MVP. So with that logic, I've been making the argument for Abizi. Just, I think he is the best player in his role. Nobody else is, you know, in my opinion, nobody else does that like aggressive SMG entry role as well as he does. So, other than that, I think both the lists make sense to me. I guess if the biggest like point here is whether Celium or Cammy is number 3, that just goes to show how far ahead Simp and Abizi are in that MVP race compared to their the other contenders. So yeah, I still think, end of the day Simp walks away with the award. But it's just it's cool to see, I guess it gives us some validation that, people listening to us know we kind of know what we're talking about.
Well, I always know what I'm talking about. We worry
Oh yeah.
about you, but sometimes we have to get our
Okay.
Ego Chow correspondent on the case, and he straightens you out. But kidding aside, I think obviously Simp and Abizi, top players in the league. We've known this for months and months now. Really, it was kind of obvious last year. I think I picked Simp to win the MVP when I had a vote, and then they gave it to Shotzi, and then I didn't get my vote back. So I don't know about that. But I think that Simp has been the best Call of Duty player in the world basically since he turned 18, which is kind of ridiculous to think about how good he's been, how impactful he's been. But I don't think that Abizi can be slighted at all because you can't separate Simp and Abizi's impact on their teams because they've been on the same team Simp's entire pro career. So we don't really know if Simp or Abizi is, like I mentioned in a few episodes ago, it's like the Belichick Brady thing. You don't really know who's more important to a team's success because they're linked and them together is better than them separately. I mean, maybe the Buccaneers will make me regret that statement if they win like 5 more Super Bowls with Brady, and then I'm just like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe Brady was the factor there. But for Simp and Abizi, they have their opportunity to win their second world championship this year, their second world championship together. If they make it to grand finals, this will be their third straight year that they went to the champs grand finals, pulling a J cap, it seems like. So I think it's obvious that Simp or Abizi is the best player in the league. I guess we'll just see which one actually wins the award.
Yep.
Unless you have anything else, we can wrap up the show. Okay, so make sure to subscribe or follow the podcast on whatever platform you're listening or watching on. So if you're on YouTube, make sure to subscribe, like the video, share the video. We're on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcast, really any podcasting platform out there. Make sure to give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, please. And make sure to follow us on Twitter. Bink is at jbink with 2 Ks. I'm at Prez Byers. And the podcast Twitter is at Ego Chall Podcast. We always update our audience on when we're recording the podcast. It's almost always Tuesday at 11:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I believe that is what we're going to do next week as well, where we'll wrap up the Stage 5 Major. We'll break it down. And then we will also probably give our previews for champs then, because we might be taking August 10th off. So our next show will be on Tuesday, August 3rd. If there are any changes, make sure to follow at Ego Chall Podcast or either of our Twitters, and we'll make sure to update you. And we will see you next week. So Bink, take it away.
Yep. As always, guys, thanks for tuning in. Exciting week of COD ahead. Looking forward to the final major of the year before champs. Should be, a lot of exciting matches. So yeah, thanks for tuning in. And as always, remember to send the chow.